Bitcoin being used as a security layer, we don't change it, we don't damage it, it should stay for decades. And the innovations which are more impactful are happening on the next layer, and you can experiment there much more. And we have, with this recent mentioned Taproot change, we have other projects in the pipeline happening on top of Bitcoin, just to mention Taro. So Bitcoin being criticized like a low improvement, not really much happening, slow network. For me, that's a feature, not a bug, because you don't want to change your monetary system too much. You don't want to impact the brand, and you don't want to impact the security of Bitcoin. Welcome, everyone. Nice to see you here. Thank you for the introduction. Chaos. There is a thin line between chaos and an order. And actually, you can shift from one to the other pretty smoothly. Jose Saramago, you see this man in the middle, once said, actually wrote in one of his books that chaos is merely an order waiting to be deciphered. Jose Saramago was a writer, Portuguese writer, winner of the Nobel Prize in literature. And you see these beautiful birds on the screen. No worries, I will not be talking about birds too much. But there are answers in nature to many of the questions, even the technological questions. I'm going to talk about cryptocurrencies. I'm going to talk about something what I believe is the holy grail of cryptocurrencies, namely the governance, the boring subject of governance. We talk decentralization, like a buzzword in this crypto reality, decentralization of nodes, users, infrastructures, and so on. Not that often we talk about decentralization in how we govern those networks, and I think it is important. But before we go into that subject, let's take a step back. I think we as a people have this need or desire to work in groups, to form communities, to join particular societies. We like to stay together. No matter if we are small kids, we just play with other kids outside. When we grow up, we join communities, we join companies. And on an even bigger level, we are part of the cities, beautiful cities like Krakow or Wrocław or Warsaw. And we feel part of those communities. We feel part of the nation states even. Why do we do so? I believe that we seek security. In the group, we feel safer. So we unite to ensure this basic level of security. And once this is achieved, obviously, seeking security is one thing, but we typically go for some other objectives. And for kids, the real objective is just to play games. For companies, security might be just a surviving cash flow, but the real objective of the company would be probably, fighting for more business, generating revenue. And for nation states, I'm sure you can come up with your own ideas what the other objectives are. And the way we unite in these communities, we are actually seeking this need for communication. We the fact that we are part of particular community, we seeking need to communicate with each other in order to make decisions. So the bigger the group is, we will need to communicate with other folks so that we decide where we go with our particular objective. Same applies to crypto networks. Crypto networks are also communities. Crypto networks will attract different stakeholders. Crypto networks will attract miners, will attract developers, will attract node providers. So those parties are actually looking for ways to contribute to this network. Hopefully, they want to be part of the decision-making process in order to be able to develop these networks. So they also need a process to make decisions. And again, this is what I would call a governance model. Governance model, how we communicate in order to make decisions. And for crypto networks, that will be particularly important for this governance model to stay decentralized, because otherwise this whole concept doesn't make sense. Governance model which is not decentralized doesn't make sense, because everything in this world should be decentralized. So how do we achieve decentralization? Actually, is the only answer to stay decentralized, the good answer in those networks. On one hand, I started with this chaos. Chaos in nature, birds are a good example of chaotic animals which at some stage can organize into order, can organize into something what can make them stronger. And I always have this idea that hierarchical structures, they're good, they have their advantages. But when I walk down the park before the sunset, it's getting dark, birds are preparing their places on the trees. They will take different branches of the tree, and number of seats on the upper parts of the trees are limited, right? So they will be like fighting for these upper parts of the trees. Number of seats on the lower branches of the trees, there are more seats available. But I always ask myself the questions, those who stay at the lower branches of the tree in the morning, probably they need to clean up their feather. So that's why there is this fight for going up the pyramid, if you will. So nature organizes itself in different ways. Crypto networks will organize themselves also in different ways. And advantages of decentralized models will probably, we are sourcing the knowledge of the crowd, right? So there are many parties, everyone have a say. It is a bit of chaotic, but we are kind of leveraging this to come up with the best ideas, hopefully. They will be more bulletproof, but because it's harder to attack something what is dispersed, something what is decentralized. On the other hand, they're slower, because it's hard to make a decision, to communicate in a decentralized manner. When we talk of centralized models, they're faster, they're more efficient. But there is this temptation of bribery, collusion, so those who are at top of the hierarchy can potentially collude for their interests. Particularly in some cases, it may actually go into, when we talk nation states, models where you have this king and you have to kiss the king in the ring, otherwise you are like a bad actor. In both of those models, we actually struggle with incentives. So I think the way we design incentives will actually drive the behaviors of people. So this carrot and the stick is like a challenge how we do that. And coming back to Jose Saramago, deciphering chaos into something what is more organized works in nature, works in crypto networks, and birds can organized into like forms, into groups where like a smaller birds can defend their nest against like a bigger attacker, like who is trying to attack the nest of the birds, so they can actually unite, and from this chaos they can decipher into something what is stronger. Birds can move continents from one to the other just to avoid the winter. Same, that reminds me of Bitcoin miners, where Chinese government banned Bitcoin mining May last year, and Bitcoin miners, like the birds, move to the other continents, and network security survived. So I think there are some analogies here. So my feel is there is no good answer, no one good answer for how we govern those networks. Something what works for Bitcoin may be perfect for Bitcoin, but something what works, what other networks need may be better for like projects like Algorand, Polkadot, Scale, Cosmos, etc. Those are smart contract platforms, so they will go for much broader scope of use cases. For Bitcoin, the use case is being our digital money, being digital gold. So simple, narrowed use case for platforms which are supposed to serve services for other applications, much wider scope of use cases. Governance model from Bitcoin may not be applicable. We'll tackle this in a while. So let's take this example of Bitcoin. Bitcoin, digital money, money have this certain properties. Like if you have like a sound money, you probably want this money to be durable. You want this money to be scarce. You don't want to print too much of money. We know this from our current fiduciary system. So you don't want to print too much money, and you want to the money to keep up with its brand, right? So you don't want to change too much your monetary system so that people recognize your money as a money. So Bitcoin, if wants to be this monetary system, this global nation-state independent monetary system, you don't want to change your money too much. Because you're introducing new surfaces of attack, you are destroying the brand, you are possibly endangering Bitcoin for printing more money, which is probably not a good thing. So Bitcoin came up with its own, I would say, pretty chaotic governance model. But let's first take a look of who is incentivizing Bitcoin to participate in this process. So there are like developers, very niche animals in the Bitcoin network. They're not being paid for developing Bitcoin network. It is an open source. Everybody can be this niche animal. They will do this for social recognition, for influence, because that's something what they love. That's like a freak of engineering mindset. And there's like less than 100 of Bitcoin core developers. They are very closely engaged into governance of this network. Miners, those are who are producing blocks. Miners are being paid with the block rewards. Miners are being paid with transaction fees. So miners will be very interested in being part of the governance on the Bitcoin network because they want to keep up their businesses. They want to get these rewards. They want to make sure that the future of the Bitcoin network is sound. So they have this interest in being part of this governance process. Node providers, those nodes which are shifting blocks back and forth, shifting transaction back and forth, verifying the transactions, they are also very much interested despite not being paid for their work. But nodes are typically side business for someone. So there is an exchange, there is a wallet, there is a merchant, and running a Bitcoin node is just like a side business for them. They want to verify the transaction because their business depends on it. So they want to be part of the governance process of Bitcoin because their core business depends on it. So they will be seeking security in Bitcoin. They will be seeking more utility in the Bitcoin network. And the common community users of the applications, everyone who has a wallet is using this wallet. We also want more utility out of Bitcoin. And for all of those parties, actually, probably most of these parties have some Bitcoins in their wallet. So we want the network to stay secure, to survive, so the network can attract more users, so the network value can grow further. So again, we will be incentivized in a common way as well. And I was trying to visualize the governance process for the Bitcoin network in a very simplistic way. There are shortcuts in how I present it, but just to illustrate like the core concept, those niche animals of Bitcoin development, it's not mine, those niche animals of Bitcoin developers, they are actually writing the bills. They are writing the future law. In Bitcoin, code is the law. So whatever comes in the code will be then part of the Bitcoin software. So they are a very important part of like the governance process. But before they actually can write a code for Bitcoin, they first are sourcing various ideas from infrastructure guys, from miners, from businesses, their own ideas. They will be observing what's happening in the network. They will be observing what's good for the security of the network and so on. And they form via various mailing lists, etc., proposals for Bitcoin improvements. And we call it BIPs, Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. This has its numbers. And such a Bitcoin Improvement Proposal, actually, before it is activated, it first needs to be aligned in this group of developers. So they are trying to achieve consensus in this group of developers. Is this proposal valid? Is this important for Bitcoin? And it takes time. It takes time. It takes sometimes months or years for certain proposal to get approved in this niche group of developers. Once they have this consensus on, okay, that is an important proposal for Bitcoin, then it would be merged at some stage into the GitHub repository of Bitcoin core code. And once it is merged, it's still far from activation. It's still far from being part of the network operations. We still have those miners who are producing blocks. Miners will be voting with their hash power on like either approving the change or rejecting the change. And the threshold for miners is typically very high, so they would need 90–95% of the miners to agree for a change over the certain period of time before it's activated. Node providers, again, they will then need to upload this code on their machines. Once the code is uploaded, they will need to start verifying the transaction, etc. So all these parties will have a say. It is not very well organized process. Every change in Bitcoin network can go a bit different path. There is a path where miners have like a veto for a change. There are cases where miners do not have a veto. Change will get activated anyway. So the network itself, out of this chaos, goes into direction which is hopefully good for the network. Actually, everyone, because it's open, everyone can be miner, node provider, developer. There are certain criteria, there are certain equipment requirements, skills required, etc. But it is possible. It is possible for everyone from the community, from us, to be part of this governance process because it's open. And because it's so chaotic, because it's so decentralized, it's actually hard to push through a change on the network. But there are examples of successful network changes, luckily. Some time ago, it's 2015, 2016, 2017, Bitcoin network, due to growing adoption, noticed like a increased cost of transactions. So the adoption was actually harmful from the network in some extent. And there was a need to implement improvement how we actually go on with processing transactions. So there was like an idea of SegWit, segregated witness. Was a change to make the network more efficient, change how the transactions are being structured, how many transactions we can put in the block. So that was like an idea for big improvement in the network performance, which was not like very well aligned in the network community. Bitcoin network community. There were people who wanted big blocks. There were people who wanted like optimization within this current block. Block is like where we put all the transaction on Bitcoin network. So eventually, SegWit went live in August 2017, but network forked. There were other Bitcoin created, Bitcoin Cash was created as a side effect of this discussions how to optimize Bitcoin network. And for a network, it was not like a very good thing because security suffered, miners have split into two groups, nodes split into two groups, community got split. So security network was for a time impacted, was lowered, and that was big lessons learned. So the next big change happened last year in November. We call it Taproot. Again, Taproot for Bitcoin introduced a lot of bold changes, you may say, introduced better scripting language, introduced gates for privacy features on Bitcoin, so you can pay, in private way your Bitcoin to another with some other tools. It introduced, again, optimization inside of the Bitcoin transaction so the cost can be lowered. And Taproot took all these lessons learned from SegWit, and Taproot activation went really, really smooth. But still, it took several years for this next change to push through. This chaotic network learned what went not well with SegWit and implemented this some magic way into Taproot. Not many changes in Bitcoin. Not many changes because Bitcoin needs to stay secure. Bitcoin, if we think about this as a basic monetary system, digital money, you shouldn't change your money too much. So for me, that there are certain improvements into the Bitcoin code, it is a good thing, but we don't want too many improvements. Some people will criticize Bitcoin for that, but then the question, so where are these all innovations should happen for Bitcoin? There are next layers. So there are projects which are building on top of Bitcoin. They are using Bitcoin as the security layer. They're using Bitcoin ledger to store transaction data there, and they will add up extra functionalities on next layers. And not many people recognize that first tokenization happened on Bitcoin with projects like Colored Coin in the early years of Bitcoin. Smart contract capabilities were actually initiated by Bitcoin community with projects like Counterparty or Mastercoin. And then after a few years of a break, we have once the SegWit got activated, SegWit enabled more functional Bitcoin. So it enabled fast and cheap payments on top of Bitcoin with projects like Lightning Network, Liquid. And we've seen more and more innovations with projects like Stacks, smart contracts for Bitcoin, projects like Rootstock, smart contracts on top of Bitcoin. So Bitcoin being used as a security layer, we don't change it, we don't damage it, it should stay for decades, and the innovations which are more impactful are happening on the next layer, and you can experiment there much more. And we have, with this recent mentioned Taproot change, we have other projects in the pipeline happening on top of Bitcoin, just to mention Taro. So Bitcoin being criticized like a low improvement, like a not really much happening, slow network. For me, that's a feature, not a bug, because you don't want to change your monetary system too much. You don't want to impact the brand, and you don't want to impact the security of Bitcoin. So this chaotic group of developers, node providers, miners, they're actually eventually achieving consensus on the changes which are really, really important for Bitcoin existence, security, and also opening some gates for extra features which are then enabled on the next layers for Bitcoin. But you may ask, okay, so how do you want to build this Web3 reality on top of something like this? This Web3, just to remind, Web 1, we've seen static pages. Web 1 we call like a read, I call it. Web 2 would be read and write. Web 3 is read, write, and own. You may ask first, why do we actually need Web 3 in the first place? What is Web 3? What is this owning? So with current infrastructure providers in the Web 2 economy, we've seen companies like Google, Amazon, Facebook coming up with their like a centralized infrastructure. They are providing great service for the customers. They are providing great value for the shareholders, for the company. Not necessarily they are taking care very well about our privacy, very well about our data. So that's natural to some extent. That's natural because you know, the governance model is centralized. Web 2, as we know it today, is pretty centralized because these big companies staying behind those platforms. So they will drive the development of the network in a way that is good for the shareholders, companies, employees, customers, but sometimes the user, I'm not saying user experience, but our data and our privacy is forgotten. So with Web 3, which is the promise of some of the crypto networks, we can actually improve this because Web3 give us this own property. Own in Web3, if you design it properly, you may own the infrastructure, you may own your data, you may own your identity, the whole history, you may own your assets, you may even own your governance process. So for this kind of designed setup, you may actually involve community, everyone, into governance of your blockchain network. So for platforms, I think it is important to have a governance model which includes the whole community. And I will use example of one of the platforms I'm particularly closer to, which is Algorand. Algorand is like a smart contract platform, we say platform for building the Web3, building the decentralized applications. It was founded by Silvio Micali from MIT. Silvio is a cryptographer. Silvio is a professor awarded with Turing Award for his work in cryptography. And at some stage, he decided, OK, let's do something in this crypto world. He founded Algorand 2017. And Algorand as a network went live 2 years after, in the middle of 2019, and is a platform for Web3, is a platform from decentralized finance, and many engineers from various universities are working on this project, including MIT, but other as well. Not to overflood you with the details, the architecture of Algorand, we have those basic nodes at the bottom, which are, everyone can be this node. Nodes are trying to achieve consensus. What is the state of the network? What is good for the network? What is the true value of the transaction of the network? Nodes will cooperate, will try to achieve consensus so that every node has the same understanding about what's happening in the network. Nodes will automatically also try to detect bad actors and will reject them. So they are cooperating together. And nodes are using something called pure proof-of-stake consensus mechanism for this objective. That's a algorithm designed by Algorand. So they are cooperating according to pure proof-of-stake consensus mechanism. Everyone can be part of this. And Algorand built programming features with like a TEAL, which is transaction execution approval language, where you can actually write smart contracts for your Web3 from your DeFi. And to make it possible for everyone to write easily those programs, there is an Algorand virtual machine which makes it possible even for Java developers, from JavaScript developers, Python, Go. Many languages are possible to be used and easily program the future of web on top of Algorand. Tokenization is possible on Algorand. Algorand came up with their own tokenization mechanism called Algorand Standard Assets. Algorand has this way to communicate with the rest of the crypto world with a mechanism called state proofs. And Algorand obviously attracted many developers and applications which are popping up on top of this network. Just to give some stats, those nodes, we see like 1,600 nodes in the network right now. There is more than 3,000 developers in the Algorand network. And there is nearly 2,000 applications already in the network. But it's hard to count it because, you know, it's community-driven effort, but it's like something between 1,000 and 2,000 applications in the network. And there are like 50,000 governors. Governors are those who are helping to drive the decisions for the network forward. Whole ecosystem is glued with Algo token, which is used for transaction fees, but is also used for the governance process. So everybody who holds Algo token can make decisions, may have a say in where the network should go. And network is capable of processing like 6,000 transactions per second and finalize them in less than 4 seconds. So I think it's pretty good. I'll not overload you with these stats, but that's, I think, important for the next part, which is governance process. I've mentioned 30,000 governors, 30,000 people involved in governing this network. Algorand started actually the governance process from the bit different perspective than Bitcoin. So it started pretty centralized, whereas Algorand Foundation, staying behind this project, was proposing what's good for the network, and they were implementing this. After some time, they shifted to where we are right now, to more decentralized model, where it's Algorand Foundation submitting proposals, but we as a governor, so everyone who holds Algo token is voting against or for particular change, and if the particular change has a majority of votes, then it gets implemented. So that's where we are today. And what got approved already and should go live like next month, it is even more decentralized process for the governance. So in this model, governors, so everyone in the community, can submit proposal for what we think is good for the network to grow, to stay secure, to attract more use cases. So everyone who has an idea, and you need to have at least one Algo token, you can submit your idea. If you are able to build the notion to attract interest from other stakeholders in the network, your proposal will get visibility to a so-called group of expert governors. Expert governors, it's again open environment of subject matter experts, either in infrastructure, in tokenomics, or in development, and they will pick up proposals from which they believe make sense for the network. They are like operating in their own DAOs. DAO is a decentralized autonomous organization, and they align, okay, this particular chain makes sense, we'll pick it up, and if the expert governors achieve consensus in the group that particular changes, improvement sound, they will just submit it to Algorand Foundation. Algorand Foundation just refines them and submit for voting for all community and approved gets implemented. So in this new, hopefully coming soon process for Algorand, we are actually sourcing the wisdom of the crowd. Everyone can come up with his own idea, and this should probably result in even more innovations, even more interesting ideas how to move with the network forward. So I'm pretty excited for this to go live, this new governance model. It is pretty fairly decentralized, I believe. And even with the current model, Algorand, I think, was pretty successful, as I've mentioned, attracting many of the use cases already. On the screen, just a handful of examples from this total of 2,000 projects. We see projects like FIFA selected Algorand as an official platform for their digital economy. So they will, they're actually, it's already live, one of these projects where they are in the form of NFT, they are giving you access to be an owner of particular moments from the games. And there are more projects FIFA is going to implement on top of Algorand. We are seeing projects like Fox Finance or ArgoFi. Those are like decentralized finance applications where you are natively moving your assets in various ecosystems of DeFi projects. Those are pretty interesting projects as well. We see also pretty, some would say, scary ideas of CBDC, so central bank digital currencies, being tested on top of Algorand with projects for Republic of Marshall Island. We are seeing projects like Monerium, which is e-euro or digital euro, also selected Algorand as the official platform. You can be part of the real estate economy with projects like Lofty AI, which is tokenizing real estate on top of Algorand blockchain. And you can actually own just a fraction of the real estate and take yield from, from this tokenized real estate this another way. So Lofty AI is, again, interesting, pretty innovatory project. And brands like Napster, probably some of you still remember Napster. Napster is coming back to the digital economy on top of Algorand, and they will probably be doing something with the NFT, which is recently very, very popular topic in the crypto world. I will not mention chess or drones and many, many other projects which are being built on top of Algorand. And crypto innovations are accelerating. So with Bitcoin 2008, just a pretty niche use case, peer-to-peer digital cash. Then we've seen in 2014 Ethereum coming up with smart contract platform and thousands of projects being made possible thanks to Ethereum. Today we see projects like Cardano, Algorand, Ethereum obviously in version 2.0 scale, Internet Computer, Cosmos, and thousands of other projects trying to be part of this Web3, be part of this DeFi world. Some will go for gamify area, some will go building metaverses, others will build social media, others just want to build everything at all. Others will just have narrowed use case of like a storage, decentralized storage. And something what worked for Bitcoin in terms of governance would not necessarily work for other use cases. So the governance process is also evolving, and I think that's good. It's taking lessons from the past. And my vision of the future for this industry is that there will be not like one winner or two winners. There will be a certain group of projects which got specialized. So one platform may get specialized in digital storage, decentralized storage, the other will get like a digital identity on the blockchain, other will be a smart contract platform, other will be our monetary system. Those platforms will interoperate, they will communicate, and because they there's this joint effort of decentralized platforms communicating each other to serve value, we'll see even more interesting use cases on top of this platform. We started with a niche use case of money, then pretty rough smart contracts, applications, and right now we see this gamify metaverses, we see cities and nation states getting interested in those projects and in those technology. So again, I think that many of these projects will fail and the governance model will evolve into something which is probably different than what we know today, probably not fully decentralized, hopefully not fully centralized, because my wish is that with all of this stuff happening, we will not end up where we started. And that's part on our side to get engaged, to involve in any of these projects you may be following. Thank you.
I don't see any questions on the Discord server, so I will open up the floor to questions from the audience. So please raise your hand, jump up, wave your arms if you have them. I'll give you a moment to think about it, because I have one question for you. Towards the end of the talk, you started mentioning, for the majority of the talk, you were talking about governance models as they apply to Bitcoin. You started to mention some of the other cryptocurrencies and how they were involved. And I just wondered if you can expound on that a little bit. Are the same governance processes which apply to Bitcoin applicable to all other cryptocurrencies, or do they need modification, or how do you see that interplay?
Yeah, so from many projects which I'm following, I think Bitcoin's governance model is most decentralized, you may say, most chaotic, and in result very slow. I don't see many projects actually following this route because, and I'm glad you asked this because I forgot to mention during the presentation that in this race for building this Web3, we still have the Web2 platforms like Google's, Amazon's of the world, Facebook chasing in this race, right? So they are part of this race as well, and they're pretty fast. Fast in developing their services and coming up with even more ideas. Bitcoin's governance model is slow. So these projects, some of them mentioned here, they are trying to come up with a governance model which enables better environment for innovation, so enables faster development, enables being well fitted for these future use cases.
Adaptable.
Yeah, adaptable, exactly. They're pretty different, but there are examples of projects which are trying to stay together to the narrative of Bitcoin or in terms of the governance. But that's probably, just exceptions, I would say.
Okay, thanks for the answer on that. So let's turn to the audience then. Anyone have a question they'd like to ask to Andrzej? It's hard to see past the lights. Okay, so if not, I have one more for you. So I had a great chance to talk with Andrzej a little bit before his talk. I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about the T-shirt you're wearing there and how your YouTube channel and the things you discussed there. Maybe tell us a little bit about yourself that way.
Yeah, so my T-shirt is UTMB's, Ultra Trail de Mont Blanc. I'm ultra runner, so ultra marathons is something more than marathons. So it's typically 100 kilometers or more, typically mountains or other parts of the world. This comes from the race around the Mont Blanc, which I've completed more than a month ago. And
congratulations, that's amazing.
Yeah, it was like a hard thing. And on my YouTube channel, I actually record some of my races. I present myself that I'm running crypto ultra marathons because pretty often when I run or when I walk or when I train, I record it and I talk about cryptocurrencies and blockchain projects. So it's like a compilation of running and technology in one place, which I think is pretty weird.
It sounds really fascinating. I'm going to check this out for sure. So if there's no further questions, let's once again give Andrzej a very warm thank you for his talk today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andrzej.
Thank you.